I also have habit trackers in here that I haven't used since January.
Oh, man.
Thank you very much.
Hello, Debbie.
I need to pay this.
Hello, hello. I'm going to give everybody just a minute to get on here. Hope you guys are having a lovely day.
Excellent.
Oh, hi. There you are. I can hear you now. Are you having a great day?
Yeah, trying to get the gel off my nails.
Oh, God. You're in the same boat as half of America, trust me.
This is horrible.
I know. Like, our roots are long. Our nails are bad.
And I am gray.
Yeah, me too. Trust me.
I hate it.
Lots of gray everywhere. Oh. Sorry for the change in the schedule today. I had to get some stuff finished this morning, and so I'm glad that you guys could join us this afternoon.
It was perfect for me. I got to go to a networking meeting.
Good. How are those working out for you guys? What are you still doing?
Perfect. I'm still doing everything I ever did. It was a Fem City meeting. There were 10 people. It was great.
All right. So do you guys actually go to the meeting or?
No, it's on Zoom.
Oh, cool. Cool.
Yeah. And same with networking today. We're still doing it. Yep, meeting.
That's awesome.
Whatever it is.
Awesome. Are you still working, Debbie, on your kind of like relocation packages to other agents? How are those going?
I will work on them. By the end of this, I'll have it done, but I don't think I'm going to send it out until nobody's in the office. It'll be like a waste. I'll have that ready to go.
Yeah.
You think?
I agree with you. That's why I was wondering if you had already sent them out or if they're, what's going on with them, because I imagine nobody's in their office. So
no, and a lot of them were in New York, and then New York. So I've got the names, I've got the stuff. I need some stuff printed, but it will be ready to go in the future.
Sure. Well, good deal. I know Genevieve had a rough morning this morning. One of her contracts terminated today, so I'm sorry, Genevieve, that happened.
Hey, it worked out because I had a buyer client of mine from last year. She gave me a referral right after all that happened.
Oh, that's great. That's good.
So I said, well, you win some, you lose some. I guess I got to just look at the positive.
100%. And the other part is that you got to fill your, fill your pipeline with so much that when one falls out, it doesn't bother you, like it's not going to hurt you. If one falls out of contract and one terminates, you've got others behind you. So Dina's raising her hand. Hi, Dina.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. This was a different screen for me, so I just wanted to make sure that you could hear me and know that I was here.
Yep.
If I had questions. So anyway.
I got you. You are here. Thank you. So sometimes when you, there's a difference on Zoom between meetings and webinars. Meetings are where they show your face kind of everywhere. And if there's a lot of screen sharing or I'm trying to show you guys things like screens, then it's easier to put it as a webinar than a meeting, because I can't really share documents very easily with meetings. It won't let me upload them at all. So it's just easier to do them as webinars. So that's why this is a webinar instead of a meeting, and so the screen looks a little different. Okay.
I like that.
Yeah. Well, I hope that you look all pretty and you washed your hair today and you look lovely. Like But you
Nope.
probably already did a tire workout today, so who knows what your hair
And
looks
I
like.
still look like I did a tire workout,
Good
which
for
I
you.
did earlier.
Good for you. Well, I'm looking rough myself today. We were just talking about our roots and our nails and all the things that we're sacrificing when it comes to beauty at the moment. So, but we're going to get through it. It's okay. So,
Yeah. I was going to ask you guys real quick, ladies, do you guys have a go-to coloring kit? Have you guys tried like that Madison Reed or anything
Yeah, well,
like
I
that?
use the powder.
Oh, what?
I mean, I've never done it out of a box myself. I've got the box, but I'm not going to do it. But I use the powder. They've got this great powder. So I just put it on my roots.
Madison Reed?
Yep.
Okay.
you order it online?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I need to look into that because I'm seriously looking haggish.
Yeah.
I don't know how it works with blonde. I mean, it works with my
Well,
dark hair.
yeah.
Well,
can
the blonde,
typically
I
go-
imagine, is similar. It's just
Yeah,
a
and
lighter tone.
I don't know about you, Laura, but I can typically go a little longer than my brunette friends with my coloring because I'm blonde. But right now I'm looking a little ashy, just gonna say. Not looking good. So thank you. I'm gonna look into that. Thanks, Debbie.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Erin says, hello, ladies.
Hey, Erin.
Hi, Miss
Hi.
Erin.
She says hello. We are just trying to keep our sanity here like everybody else. So this session is, and again, this is a white picket fence perfect world where you would have a buyer consultation meeting prior to ever showing a house, prior to them writing an offer, obviously. It's in a perfect world where you would separate your process into a buyer consultation appointment and then move into showing houses and write a contract. Okay, so this is only the buyer consultation section, which is how do I, one, we're going to talk about getting an appointment because, again, that's where a lot of people kind of fall off the face of, how do I go ahead? How do I get them to come in for an appointment, or how do I get them to schedule an appointment? The other part is just making sure you're doing a very thorough wants and needs analysis and how you're going to respond to that wants and needs analysis, and making sure that you're asking enough questions to be able to help them. So you're asking enough questions to gather enough information so that you can help them the best way that you possibly can. So we're going to talk about that. The other part for me, I believe, and can you guys all see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
So the other part I think is really important is talking about the market conditions on the front end. So you save yourself a lot of heartache, a lot of trouble, a lot of backlash, a lot of when buyers get cold feet or have buyer's remorse. You're going to save yourself from a lot of that if you will discuss market conditions on the front end before you guys ever go look at properties. And we'll talk about that. We're going to talk about the process, how you're going to break the process down for the buyer and explain to them what to expect along the way. And then things that you need to know for preparing them for when you go to write a contract. And then you're going to talk about any partners that you have that you're going to refer to them along the way. Everybody with me?
Yes.
All right. So the big thing is, let's talk about the appointment. So again, I'm going to remind you guys, I say it probably 14 times a week. So if you haven't heard it this week, then I've failed to do my job. But, the first step on the sales cycle is what? What's the first step of the sales cycle?
An appointment.
Lead generation is the first step, which
Oh.
leads to the second step, which is getting an appointment, right?
Yeah.
So we've got to generate leads, and we've got to make those leads try to get face-to-face with them, whether that is a listing appointment or if that is a buyer consultation appointment, or if it's even a looking at a house appointment. But you've got to get them to an appointment stage. So let's just talk, because most y'all are all experienced, which I like, just because it's easier to talk about what has worked for you in the past. let's share how you go about getting a lead to commit to an appointment. Does anybody want to share that?
I haven't.
Usually for me, Laura, it's been they call up, they want to look at a property, and I usually try to get them on the phone before we do that.
Sure.
For the most part, if I can get them on the phone and let them know that I'm sending them some information about me, why working with, Chris and I is to their benefit, et cetera, then I feel like I can, I feel like I can win them over at the appointment where I show them a house if I give them enough information to feel like they're comfortable with me.
Sure.
and working with me. So that's kind of the way that we've kind of been doing it, and it's worked pretty well. It doesn't always work, but it's worked pretty well.
And you're right. I just want you to, and this is my opinion, again, take it or leave it, but I think that when you get the buyer on the phone, obviously you're going to, ask the questions, try to establish rapport and trust with them. But what I would encourage you to do is start saying, what is a good time for us to set up a buyer consultation call or a Zoom call or an appointment or something, like whatever. Obviously, while we're not meeting people in face-to-face, one of the ways that you can obviously get the appointment is to ask for it. Hey, I really would love to set up a buyer consultation appointment with you. We can do that via Zoom call or Facebook Messenger call or whatever it is, but I would like to set up a consultation appointment with you. To me, what that says to a buyer is, I'm not just going to be an order taker. I really want to talk with you about our process. I want to make sure you're informed and educated on the front end. I want to make sure I'm giving you an opportunity to talk about what it is that you're looking for. I want to answer whatever questions you have, but I want us to get to know each other and how I can help you and what you can expect before we ever go looking at properties. And you can even state that in your email or text or whatever to them in asking for an appointment. Is I love to, conduct a buyer consultation appointment with my buyers so that we have an opportunity to talk about what to expect and how we're going to work together. That's the short version of the appointment, right? So
can I be honest? The more confident that I get with my skills and my abilities and my knowledge, the more I feel like I can confidently do that.
Sure.
But it's taken me 2.5 years to get to that point.
Right. And I get that. The reality though is that your buyer, and what I'm trying to get you guys to do is establish a process for how you work with people. So what I don't want you to do is to be order takers. I don't want someone to call you and just say, hey, can I go look at this house? Because I think you miss valuable, important steps of the home buying process where you just show up to a house and you show it to them and you write an offer. Yes, that's easy.
Right.
Yes, we all want to make money. But I will tell you that you're going to lose out on their perception of the experience. You're going to lose out on their expectations and setting them appropriately. You're also going to lose out on the opportunity of educating them about what the process looks like and how you guys are going to work together. So confidence or not, my advice to you is to do what you can to be confident in saying that this is a necessary step of our process. Even if it's a 20-minute, it doesn't need to be an hour. Like what we're going to cover today, if you covered all the things that I'm telling you, it's going to take you an hour. You don't have to do an hour consultation with somebody. You can do a 20-minute call to cover most of the things we're going to talk about. But in my opinion, done right, it takes time. And the more input you give them on the front end and the more time you spend with them on the front end, setting expectations and educating them, the more problems you're solving, keeping from happening on the back end, if that makes any sense.
No,
Okay?
it does. I like that. Do you think that it makes sense? Because very rarely, and as a matter of fact, I don't think it's ever happened to where the house that I show someone is the house that they write the offer on.
Correct.
So, you know, that does allow me to build a bit of a rapport with them over the next 4, 5, 6, 30, whatever houses.
If you can get them to call you back for a second, third, fourth house, fifth house, whatever.
Yes. Yes.
But that doesn't always happen. And your ratio, you know, I know it's pretty high, but the reality is that what if you don't get an opportunity to come back in front of them the second house or third house?
So I guess my question is, do you think it would make sense, and it sounds like you think this is a good idea, is that once we've shown a house, because let's face it, that's the majority of the way that we meet buyer clients a lot of times, you know,
especially
from
especially if you're paying for lead generation platforms.
Yeah, I was going to say from some of the lead gen engines for sure. But I guess my question is, do you think it makes sense to kind of let them know at that meeting that, you know, if this isn't the house for them, one of the things that I would really like to do is set up a Zoom call so that we can talk more about, we can, you know, I mean, if they want to meet in person, fine.
Sure.
But even a 15-minute Zoom call offering that to just go over the documents that they can expect.
Well, I think you should. Personally, I think, again, I'm going to say, I think this needs to be a regular step of your process. Whether that happens for you guys after the first meeting, that's fine. After you've shown one house, that's fine. But I think you got to remember, you offering a buyer consultation to them with whatever avenue you deliver that is an added value that you're bringing to this buyer. Listen, I care about what it is that your goals are. So I want to invest the time on the front end to make sure you know the process, the forms that are involved. I want to talk to you a little bit about market conditions so that you're up to date and can make some informed decisions about when you're ready to write an offer. I want to talk to you about the partners that we've worked with and how they're going to be able to help you. And I want to be able to answer whatever questions, but more importantly, I want a better understanding about what you're looking for in a house. And if you tell any buyer that I want to gather this information before we go look at any more houses together, you're telling me that you care enough to make this an important step of the process, that it's important, right? That it's valuable service.
I mean, I would say to them, if we're going to look at a house, you know, we're making that appointment, say, hey, why don't we go grab a coffee after, just for a little bit, I've got some stuff for you. And that's when you can give them, I like to give them a copy, a draft copy of the sales contract.
Yeah.
It's because, you know, it's a big contract and I don't want them to see it for the first time when we're writing an offer. So, yeah.
And the buyer's rep too, which we've had experience with that always hasn't gone the best way.
Right. Well, I will tell you too, though, and Debbie, that's a great idea. Hey, after the showing, if you'd like, we can go grab a coffee and we can talk a little bit more about, you know, what it is that you're really looking for, or our process, or whatever. But I will tell you, sometimes it's hard if you don't already have it planned in advance right after the showing, that sometimes they won't commit to that. So
as you're making the appointment, you know, hey, I'll meet you at 10 o'clock after the showing. Why, you know, say it before we've even shown up.
Yep. And that's what was going to be my advice to you, is as long as you're doing that on the front end while you're making the appointment, then you're already setting the expectations for them that you want some extra time to talk with them, which is perfect. I just want you guys to think about how you can. Don't be afraid to ask for extra time with them. Don't be afraid to ask for an appointment to go over these things with them. Don't be afraid of inserting this process as part of another step of your process, because I think it's important, and we're going to talk about it. So,
and Laura, don't you think too that it kind of weeds out those that are serious that you
100%
want to work with?
Well, yeah. Well, here's my thing is that, like, if you're not willing to give me 45 minutes of an hour of your time on the front end, I don't know how willing I am at 4 o'clock in the afternoon to leave Franklin and drive to Goodlettsville to show you a townhouse when I can't even get you to commit to understanding the process on the front end. And so for me, it's 100% a measuring device for me to determine, you know, really how I can best help you and whether or not we're suited to work together. But a lot of people are afraid to do those kinds of testing on the front end because they're just ready to jump in any direction that somebody waves a hand at them,
Right.
which is how you spin your wheels, running ragged, jumping at anybody and everybody, when a lot of people don't meet the criteria of who I want to work with.
Yeah. And that's what I said. The more confident I get, the better at that I find myself getting.
Right.
So.
No, I mean, don't get me wrong. I've sold hundreds of houses where I didn't have a consultation on the front end. You know, we met at the house, you know, they loved it. They wanted to write an offer, or I showed them a second house and they wanted to buy that one and we never had the consultation. I mean, that's fine. But the reality is, I will tell you that that step of skipping the consultation meant more work for me on the back end.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, more than an hour's worth. It was a lot of problem solving, a lot of talking them off the ledge, a lot of conversation about how to structure their offer, arming them with data that took me 12 or 15 hours on the backside because I didn't get to spend it on the front end.
Right.
Okay. So just keep that in mind. All right. So the very first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to talk to them about their wants and their needs, right? You're going to want to find out, is this a primary residence or is this an investment property? If it's an investment, are they planning on managing it themselves? Is it a short-term rental, a long-term rental? You know, but you need to know if it's a primary residence or if it's an investment property. So believe it or not, sometimes people don't tell you all the details of what you need to know unless you ask. I had a client that I showed houses to for probably 5 or 6 months. And only like on the 6th month did I find out that they were actually looking to buy a second home, an investment property, not a primary residence. And so some of the houses that I showed them didn't even qualify for that. So obviously you want to ask enough questions on the front end to make sure that you understand what it's for and what they're going to use the property for. Especially if maybe they are buying as a primary residence, but they know they're going to move in a year and are going to want to later rent it out. Right? So if you don't ask that, there are houses in neighborhoods that wouldn't qualify for that person because there are neighborhoods all over town that don't allow rentals, period. Whether it's short-term or long-term. So you need to understand what their plan is, what their long-term goals are in their house. And you need to ask those questions in order to get them talking about it. B says desired area, and that is to talk about why that particular area is of interest. So I had a client once who was adamant about wanting to live in Hendersonville. I've got to live in Hendersonville. I only want to look at houses in Hendersonville. Stop sending me houses in Laverne, blah, 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 blah. Well, I had to keep asking, like, why Hendersonville? You know, well, I just heard that was the best place for me to live. So that's where I want to live. And I heard that the schools were the best and blah, 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 blah. I mean, she gave me 5 other reasons, all of which were not accurate based on the area. There were other options that were available to her. And so you just need to find out, why are they pinpointing this specific area? And you need to ask them, have they considered? So when someone tells you, you know, hey, I'm looking for a house anywhere in the Nashville area, or if they say specifically, I only want to live in Spring Hill, I always ask, well, can you tell me a little bit more about why you've identified Spring Hill? Why have you identified this particular neighborhood? I have had a lot of people, especially from out of state, that are maybe armed with inaccurate information and that they heard from their friends, which also meant that they were backed into a corner and had less options available to them because they hadn't considered other areas. So sometimes I can open up other options for them to think about, if I can find out why they're looking at that. Maybe they need to be in that area because their son attends a special needs school and they need to be close to the school. It's just all information that arms you to better serve their needs and how you can help them. Okay. C says, is there a payment they're trying to stay under? So some people you'll find are very payment driven. Some people are interest driven. Some people are, give me as much money as I qualify for, so that I can buy the nicest house that I maybe can't afford. But you need to ask them, is there a payment that they're trying to stay under? A lot of times I will ask that instead of saying, well, how much are you qualified for? Or have you spoken with the lender and gotten pre-approved? Because sometimes, and again, in the beginning of this conversation, you're still building rapport and trust with them. And so talking about money in the very beginning sometimes can be a mistake, and sometimes can be hard for them to open up about money and finances and what budget they're in. So you may talk about that later in the conversation, but try to find a gentle way to talk about their budget without, without making them feel uncomfortable. So what criteria should we look for? So I'm going to scroll down for just a second. I'll scroll back up. There is a buyer questionnaire that we've used in our business for a while. It's like a 5-page questionnaire. My advice to you is don't use the questionnaire if you're not actually going to use the information that they're taking the time to fill out. So when they fill out their birthdays, if you're not going to send a card, don't ask them for their birthdays. Or if you're not going to wish them a happy birthday, don't bother asking. When it asks for their children's names or ages or whatever, a lot of agents are asking for this because they want to send their kids birthday cards or something like that. But this is a 5-page questionnaire that kind of asks them all kinds of questions about how they prefer to be communicated with, what do they do for a living, financing questions that they can help answer. And some people send this ahead of the buyer consultation appointments so that the people can fill it out ahead of time, so that you're not filling it out during the appointment, so that it saves time then. I will tell you, it's kind of important information if you can get them to fill it out, like especially when it asks for occupation. So you can find out if somebody is like the senior vice president of such and such company, and then now you realize that you've worked with 6 people from that company, or now you have you've been trying to get into the HR department for relocation business in that company. And so just having some of that occupational information helps also, so that you have maybe a database. In your database, you have notes on people in your circle, past clients that do various things. So, but those questionnaires are only going to help you if you're going to actually use the information on them. Okay. When I'm asking about criteria, I always try to say, let's do a needs versus want. You either need a fireplace or you want a fireplace. Does it have to be gas? Does it have to be wood burning? Does the master have to be on the first floor, or is that a preference? So we need to separate the difference between what do I have to have versus what do I want to have. And you'll need to talk about those. So especially if you're dealing with, cultural clients that are asking for 2 masters on the main level, hey, I noticed you said you need to have 2 masters on the main level. Can you talk to me a little bit more about why you're looking for that? And typically it's going to be because mom or grandma is coming to live with us as well, or, I have a handicapped son, or whatever it is that people are going to share with you. And all that information just better helps you to serve them. Okay. Questions on the needs or wants analysis, how to go about finding out what they need or want.
Laura,
yes.
Can you speak to, I've actually had this happen to where I've sold someone a house that was a great house, and we were able to resell it pretty quickly, but 9 months later they had to move back to Boston. Mm-hmm. So when we're helping buyers choose houses, and I've heard you talk about this before, but I think we always need to keep it in mind, is that what if they needed to sell that house a year later? And, we want to sell it to them, but then again, if it's a crap house,
Right.
you're kind of like, okay, can you just kind of talk about the way that we might approach helping choose the next house?
So I have always been super honest with my clients right on the get-go that if it's a very unique property, something that has just a not functional floor plan, it's on a main busy road, something like 28 steps going up to the front door, driveway that's super steep, the things that make a property harder to sell. I have always warned my clients right then and there that day, hey, I know you guys love this house. I know, and again, I wait to give my opinion until I know what they think. Again, I think I've taught you guys all that before, but if I haven't, I learned once. I walked into a house and was like, oh my God, this house is awful. When my clients fired me and somebody else sold it to them, that was the only house that they liked, and they knew I hated it. So they didn't feel like I was equipped to properly represent them. So I learned long ago, don't give your opinion until after you find out what they think. But at the end of the day, still, if you think that the house has some type of functional obsolescence or some type of like defect that makes it harder to sell, or it's just plain ugly, you know, I always tell my buyers, listen, I know that you love this house, and buying a house is an emotional decision, but I am here also to protect your investment. And if you lose your job or get relocated, or you need to sell this house next year, then I need to be able to make sure that you're buying a house that I can easily resell. And unfortunately, I need to tell you as your realtor that this house would be harder for me to resell because of X, Y, and Z. They don't look at the house from a resale lens. They're only looking at the house about how it meets their needs. So
Right.
I think it's really important to be very honest with them and just say, hey, and this is exactly how I've said it verbatim, I'll sell you any house that you want to buy, but I'm not doing my job by protecting your investment if I don't tell you that if you relocated in a year and we had to put this house on the market, I think we would have a hard time selling it. The masses would have a hard time with this floor plan, or that driveway would be a criticism or a difficult sell if we have to sell this house a year later. You know, and at the end of the day, if they still decide to move forward, that's their choice, but I've at least warned them that this could be a problem for somebody else a year later, because I have had that happen. You know, I sold in military towns where people moved every 2 to 4 years. So a house that somebody bought, it was definitely going to come back up that I was going to resell it in a couple of years or even a year later. And of course, the house that they bought was so freaking weird that nobody would want to buy it. And I knew that, you know, so I had to tell them. But, you know, you can't be afraid to share your opinion as it relates to resale if you think it could impact them later, because it likely will, and they're going to call you to try to sell it. You know, so I don't want to sell somebody a house that I don't think is sellable a year from now.
Yeah.
And I think you build more rapport and trust with them if you're honest with them on the front end. Just wait till you know their opinion first before you give yours. Okay. All right. Step number 2 talks about market conditions. And market conditions for me is the biggest thing that most agents skip over throughout the whole process to begin with. And I think it causes a lot of questions and a lot of damage control later when you're trying to write reasonable offers and your buyer's not being reasonable. So for me, on the consultation side, if you are spending time talking about what kind of market we're in, is this a buyer's market or a seller's market? In the area that you've identified you want to live, most of the sellers are paying on average 1 to 2% of closing costs, or they're paying 0 closing costs, or the sellers are getting 99% of list price. So I want to make sure you guys know, how do you find out what the percentage of list price to sales price is in real traps?
I guess you go to the solds.
You're going to go to the sold. You're going to look at the list price to sales price, but you have to calculate the averages yourself, right?
Yeah. Can you talk to us about that? Because I'm not sure that, I mean, I've been able to find them on the stats.
Yep. That was the next thing I was getting ready to tell you. So if you hit
okay.
the print button, on the very bottom of the print button, there's a statistics
Okay. Yeah.
button, and you can click on that and it will tell you the list price to sales price percent ratio. But if you're just trying to find out for one particular house or whatever, then you can calculate that yourself by just dividing the list price by the sales price and get the percentage. But you need to tell buyers what that percentage is. And the reason you're telling them on the front end, hey, by the way, in our market in Nashville, on average, or in this zip code, in the last 6 months, the sellers have been getting 98% of list price. By not telling your buyers on the front end that information, what's going to happen is your buyers are going to say, all right, I found the house I love. I'm ready to write an offer. The list price is $250. Let's write an offer for $220 and see what happens. right? You've all had it happen. You've all had buyers that wanted to do it.
I'm going through it right now, about ready to pull my damn hair out.
Right. And did you talk about this data on the front end?
Yes, like
Okay.
for the last 4 months.
Yeah, right. And sometimes everybody just wants a deal. But
Yes.
in general, I'll just tell you that in general, most buyers that you have this discussion with on the front end are not trying to pull shady shit on the back end, but it happens every now and then. You're still going to have people who just want a deal and want to
Well,
see what
and
happens.
These guys are, they moved here from Arizona. They are, they don't know the market like they think they know the market.
Right.
And, especially right now in the last 3 weeks, they really want a deal. And I told them, in the price range that you're looking in, people, it's 98.5% of list price where they're looking. And it's like, I don't know what else. The numbers don't lie.
No, they don't, but they want to definitely make, they definitely want a deal is the problem. They just, everybody wants to try. And I'll tell you right now, with what we've got going on right now, people are wanting to take, the ones who are out buying are wanting to take advantage of the situation. And you're going to always have that no matter what's going on in the market. Hey, just throw this number out and see what happens, because I think sellers right now are so desperate or whatever, I might be able to get a deal. And unfortunately, at the end of the day, you've got to write whatever they ask you to, but you've got to do your job to advise them and to give them valuable information on the front end and make sure they understand what kind of market they're writing offers in. And it will help curb lowball offers that people are trying to write. It will help curb, let's throw it out there and see what happens, because you're talking about it on the front end and making sure they're armed with data so that you hope they're going to write more reasonable offers. Okay. I obviously can't predict that they're all going to do it, but I'm just going to tell you on the front end, it'll help. Debbie, were you going to say something?
Yeah. Okay. I'm confused. Where do we get the stats from? The print button after we've done what? After
you've done a search for sold.
Okay.
In real tracks in a particular neighborhood or zip code. Especially in a neighborhood, if somebody's identified a particular neighborhood, you want to show them that particular neighborhood stats. But if somebody's just looking for a general area, you can do zip codes or city search. And then after you've run the search for sold in the last 6 months, if you hit the print button and you go to the very bottom of that menu, it says statistics.
All right. Thank you.
And it'll show you that percentage. No problem. So I do think you need to discuss market conditions. You don't need to have all kinds of graphs and charts and bore them to death, but you at least want to arm them with the information about what kind of market we're in, what they should expect as a buyer. Here's the other thing. Do all buyers know that the seller pays the title insurance here?
No.
No. You've got to make sure you educate them. Hey, just so you know, when I write offers as a buyer's agent, I'm going to ask the seller to provide you with a home warranty up to $650. I'm also going to ask the seller to pay the title insurance on your behalf. And then whatever else you normally write in that you would ask for. These are all terms that we can play with later. If there's a multiple offer situation, we can talk about that later and how we can use these terms differently. But in general, these are things that I'm going to do on your behalf. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Laura, do you always, I think always is a catchy, anyway. Do you typically, when you have buyers, do you typically tell them that you recommend them getting the home warranty? And,
yes.
And okay.
Every single one.
I do too. Unless it's a new construction or whatever, but even then I just throw it in. I'm finding more and more sellers are not really wanting to pay for that, which I find interesting. But
I'm not seeing that as much. I mean, for every 50 or 60 contracts I see, 48 of them are still paying for a buyer's warranty. So I would just continue to ask for them. I'm still seeing them paid for by the seller, and I'm always going to ask for one on my buyer's behalf. And if my seller doesn't want to pay for it, I'm always going to encourage my buyer to get one, because I'll promise you,
Yep.
when the refrigerator goes out, the HVAC goes out, there's a plumbing problem, whatever it is, they're going to wish they had one. And at least I can always say I offered one. Then you're not blaming me, you're blaming yourself, you know?
I agree.
That's
So
me.
how do we know if sellers are paying closing costs?
So when you scroll down to the bottom of every sold listing that comes on the list, so when you click on the MLS button and you scroll all the way to the bottom,
Right.
on the right-hand side, it'll say seller paid contribution or seller paid closing costs. So it'll show you an amount there, 5,000, 2,000, 3,000, 8,500, whatever it is. So the listing agent should have entered, if the seller paid any amount of closing costs, they should have entered that when they closed out the listing.
And so, I mean, you can look at one of them. Does it show up on a CMA or anything, like to see it?
No, so that's where I go through and I try not to, I don't use the statistics button a lot, because I go through each one of the MLS sheets and I make notes for myself. So let's say if there were 8 listings that closed in the 6 months, I'm going to go through each one of those 8 and I'm going to write down, which ones paid closing costs, and then come up with, hey, half of the sellers in the neighborhood paid a minimum of $5,000 or whatever. So I'm just gathering off each individual listing what the sellers did the 6 months prior in that area. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions about how to discuss market conditions with your buyer?
Laura, once you once a buyer has determined that they'd like to make an offer on a property, and you kind of run your preliminary comps to see what's sold and all that stuff, I'm finding that I'm not really finding that properties that my buyers are wanting to make an offer on are exorbitantly overpriced.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they're like, can you run the comps? Can you make sure that this is, that I'm not overpaying, which I'm happy to do. But I'm finding that, people are, listing agents are doing a pretty good job at keeping things relatively stable in certain areas. And right now I've got a couple of buyers looking in Nashville, and it's just like in some of the southwest areas of Nashville, and it's just crazy, the pricing still, but they're doing a good job with keeping things stable. So I guess my question for you is, are you finding that there's not really a whole lot of comp work to do?
I wish I could say I was finding that, but I'll be honest. For every 6 CMAs I do, 3 are overpriced, 1 is underpriced, and I would say the other 2 are probably in line. So I still am finding that, there are a lot of agents who haven't gotten the memo and are still trying to add an extra 10% from last year.
Okay. So are you talking about in the last month?
I would say in the last 90 days, I would still say, but even 90 days ago, I was still seeing grossly overpriced houses that I think people were adding an extra 10% for, just hoping that they could get it. But no major improvements have been done, no major upgrades. So I do see a lot of overpricing happening still. And agents who are out in our office that are trying to write offers are having a hard time seeing the values that are out there. So I'm glad you're not seeing that, but I still am. But if you do come into that case where the buyer says, can you check for us? And you look and you think that it's in line, then it's just your obligation just to say, I did check the comps in the neighborhood. To me, it looks like it's in line with, and it's priced appropriately for the market, given the condition, given the upgrades.
Yeah.
Should you always check when you're about to write an offer?
I always do.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
Always. I've never written an offer where I did not do a CMA. And even when a client was, I want to get this offer in right now, hurry up, can you get it over to me? I'm still running numbers, because I've gotten duped a couple of times. I've gotten, kind of where I was in a hurry they were in a hurry, the buyer was in a hurry, and I didn't know that neighborhood well enough to know already off the bat that it was overpriced. And then I ran numbers and they were 35 or 40 grand overpriced.
Wow. Yeah.
So it scared me enough to say I'll never submit an offer without checking numbers,
Yeah.
you know? But again, some numbers are going to be much harder for you to run. Like the way Nashville is, it's so hard to price certain properties that
It's
sometimes
awful.
you're going to run the numbers and you're just going to have to leave it to the hands of the appraiser. If your
Yeah.
buyer is willing to pay for it at that price, then you're going to have to let the appraiser do his job, because sometimes the data that we're looking at, I can't find it and I can't support it, but somehow miraculously it comes back and appraises. So it's this fine line of not making a mountain out of a molehill, but it's also just trying to help our buyers do their due diligence. But sometimes I don't see it in black and white, and I don't see it even in the comps that the listing agent provided to me that they used in pricing it. Still doesn't show me that that's what it should be priced at. But I'm not an appraiser, you know? And I tell them that that's the bank's process of helping them determine the value of the property, because the bank is the one who's concerned about the asset being worth that amount of money. You know, it's always going to be a challenge. It's going to continue to be a challenge the more we have development in neighborhoods and you have a house that was built in 1899 next to new construction. So it's just, you got to keep practicing, keep getting better at it. But in my opinion, you should not be writing an offer on a house that you have not run comps on. Okay. So
Makes sense.
all right, let's talk about the home search process. So here's the other part where during the consultation, you get to take ownership of the transaction and you get to guide the buyer towards doing things your way if you have the opportunity to influence their decision. So the first thing you want to talk about is timing. So you need to find out from the buyer, are you trying to move within 30 days? Are you in a lease until July? If you found the perfect house tomorrow, would you be ready to write an offer? That's a very important question to ask. If you found the perfect house tomorrow, would you be ready to write an offer? By not asking that question, you're going to find people that you are hot to trot. You're going to drop everything to go show them a house. You're going to find them the perfect house, and they're still going to say, oh, I need to think about it a little bit more, or I'm not ready yet, or, oh, by the way, I can't even buy a house till next year. Like if you had known that in the beginning, what their motivation is and how motivated they really are and what their timing was like, you can make some other choices about where you dedicate all your time to, right? So it's important that you ask, if you found the perfect house tomorrow, would you be ready to write an offer? That's how I phrase it. That's how I would encourage you to ask it. But talk about timing with them. What does that look like? You want to talk about the auto notification process. So based on this criteria that you've given me, I am going to set you up on what's called an auto notification. I'm going to enter in the criteria in our multiple listing service, and it's going to send you an email as any property comes on the market that meets your criteria. So you're going to get those timely. They're going to be immediate as they come on the market. And the criteria that I've put in, if that ever changes, let me know and I can update that search for you. Now, I always tell my buyers at this consultation, or anybody that I'm talking about with the auto notification, please keep in mind that I am not individually going through the MLS sending you these listings. So sometimes some are going to slip through the cracks that maybe don't meet the criteria you're looking for exactly. And that's just because the more broad I can make the criteria, the more options you're going to have. And the more I narrow that focus, sometimes it's going to weed out properties that you might have missed because the other agent entered it incorrectly, or it somehow got missed in the search. So I just kind of warn them. When I first moved to Nashville, you could not separate mobile homes from single family homes in the MLS. So sometimes my auto notifications would have trailers in them, and my clients would be pissed. Like, you're not listening to me. I'm not trying to buy a trailer. And I would just have to explain to them, not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm just trying to explain that there was no difference. I couldn't separate out the type of property in our MLS the old way when I first got here. And now you have the ability to choose a property type. And so you can make sure that you've got a site-built home and that it's not sending things that your client's not interested in. So just make sure they understand how the auto notification process works, and that they understand that that criteria can be changed at any time, and that those are going to be sent to them automatically as they come on the market. Okay? So here's where I said where you can take control. C says, what websites does the buyer use to look for properties? So again, I like to ask my buyers, hey, what website are you currently using to look at houses? A lot of them will tell you Zillow, Redfin, HomeSnap, whatever the hell one that they love. This is where I said you get to take control of it, or control a little bit more. I always make sure that they understand, hey, I understand if you prefer Zillow, the way it looks, or how it emails you or texts you when a house comes on or something like that. But I do need you to know that that's a third-party site, and that by the time you see it, it is likely probably already under contract. And so just know that if you want to continue to search on that website, you may get frustrated as a buyer that everyone you ask me to check on or make an appointment for is already under contract. So that's where you get to encourage them to use what mobile app that you want them to use. So, or what search you want them to use. So I would encourage you to search on my website, because it'll show me which houses you favorite. And that way I know which ones you like, or which ones you want to make an appointment for. And I can, mine is more accurate because it's directly tied to the MLS. I also am going to talk with buyers about networking groups of coming soon. So based on your search criteria, I'm also going to reach out to my network of other agents that I work with, and let them know that I have a buyer need who's looking for a house with the following criteria. I may be able to find us a property before it hits the market, and see if I can get us to be able to get a showing before it actually goes live on the MLS. Okay. And then F talks about wholesalers for investment. So again, if this is an investment property that somebody's looking for, I'm going to let them know that I'm going to reach out to my contacts of wholesalers to see if I can find a property before it also hits the wholesaler market. Okay. Questions about how you're going to guide the home search, how you're going to explain to them what they need to know about finding a house.
I have a question.
Who is that, Genevieve?
Yes.
Yes.
When you said direct them to your website, is that what you were telling me about, like my personal link to the page?
Yes. Yep. So you want to send them to musiccityexperts.com/Genevieve and have them search for properties there, because that's going to show you all of their houses that they save, all the houses that they favorite. It's also going to show you all the houses that they look at.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't realize that. I have to check in with Holden and see if he got me set up yet.
Oh, you're set up on it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you're set up on it. So you just have to give it out to people to send them there.
That's awesome. I didn't realize that.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is it true, if something's a coming soon, a real coming soon, we can't see it yet, can we?
Well, there are a lot of agents who, the MLS rules say that you're not allowed to see it before it goes live on the MLS, but there are lots of agents in this town that still let you in early.
Okay, that's okay, because I have somebody looking in Bellevue, and quite often they go on the market and they're gone. Yep. And my client saying, what, it just went on this morning and it's gone already.
Yeah, I mean, again, I always ask the agent, like, listen, if there's any way that there are any showings prior to the live on the MLS date, please let me know. And there are still agents that will allow showings prior to going live.
Okay. Well, what I've been doing since we're desperate is I'm checking the coming soons, because you can't do an automatic notification with coming soons every day for them.
Yeah.
And if there's any new ones, and if they want to see them, I'll do that. But,
yeah. You may have to check more than once a day. That's how fast things are flying, but I definitely would reach out. There is a Facebook group. I'm sure that you are already on it, but there's the Central Tennessee Buyer Need group. That's where I would look for anything that's coming soon, and then reach out to those agents individually and ask, is there any way we can get in it? And even if they won't let you in early, you still might be able to get the first appointment when it goes live. So, do what you can to try to get a leg up on a property. Especially if you're in a price range where the houses are so competitive and they fly off the market and within 24 hours, and your client is a muller, or they just they don't seem to understand how quickly we need to move, you've got to utilize whatever you can to try to find out about a property before it hits the market for them.
Right on.
Yep. All right. So next thing in section 4 is we're going to talk about when we write a contract, things that they need to know. So this is where you're showing them a blank copy of the contract, giving them a copy of the buyer broker agreement. Now, typically for me, you're going to sign a buyer broker agreement with me at this appointment. So I'm not usually giving it to you after you leave here and just say, hey, just so you know, later you're going to sign this. This is where I say, okay, are you ready to officially hire me to be your realtor? Are you guys ready? We've been dating for a while. We've been looking at 1 or 2 houses. It's time for us to get engaged, or it's time for us to make this official. We're getting married. So whatever it is you need to do, you've got to make sure that you're not afraid to present this buyer broker agreement and get people to commit to you to work with you. But you're going to work out your own process about when you find that it's comfortable. I'm just telling you that typically when I've done this appointment, at the end of all the things we talk about, are you ready to officially hire me to be your exclusive realtor? And if they say no, then I know they're not ready to commit to me. Then either I haven't given them enough to make a decision, or they're not loyal people to begin with, and I may not want to work with them. I don't know. That's for me to decide. But you do need to make sure that you are going to talk about what that looks like. So I need to ask them, do they have a house that they have to sell in order to buy? I will warn you that if somebody has a house that they need to sell in order to buy, you need to make sure that you write, even though let's say their house is already under contract. I've had agents who say, okay, well, it's already under contract, so I'm not going to write it contingent upon a sale of their house. If that deal falls apart and those people can't qualify, you could lose your license.
So what do we do?
So what I'm telling you is, if somebody has to sell their house in order to buy a new house, even if their house is under contract, you should write it with a home sale contingency. Because if the people don't qualify, if they have to sell their house in order to buy a new house, and if they don't qualify without having to sell their house, there are some agents who will, if it's under contract, they won't write the home sale contingency because they're afraid that the seller won't accept it, right? So all I'm telling you is that I was involved once with a threat of a lawsuit where I had the buyer, another agent had the seller. The seller, we wrote the offer, they accepted, so their house was under contract. They went to go write an offer on another property, but they did not write it contingent upon the sale of their house because they were afraid the seller would not accept a home sale contingency. My buyer's financing fell apart and could not qualify for the loan. That agent was sued by the seller, the new seller, and had a violation from the real estate commission against him, and he lost his license because he did not properly advise his clients and did not write that they were required to sell their house in order to buy a new house.
Well,
So
an offer is not a sale.
Correct. It is not a sale. So I'm just warning you, if you have a home sale contingency, you need to talk about that with your buyer. You need to talk about how that could impact them, how you're going to handle it as an agent. What kinds of things do you do when you're representing a buyer who has to sell their house? So I'll tell you, for me, I always write, if my buyer has a house to sell, I always write that, I will promise to provide weekly status updates on weekly updates to the listing agent so that they know what's going on. I will provide them with a market analysis, and I will provide them with my specific marketing plan for the property so that they know what all I'm doing to sell the house. Those 3 things in and of themselves make a huge difference in getting a home sale contingency accepted versus someone who just says it's contingent upon the buyer selling their house. I don't know if that buyer's house is priced appropriately. If I'm the listing agent, I don't know if that agent actually is going to do anything to sell it, or if they're just going to put it in MLS. I don't know what's going on, if they've had showings, if they're doing open houses, if they've reduced the price. So as a buyer's agent, you can offer to do those 3 things, and that's going to make your home sale contingency less scary for the sellers. Does that make sense?
Yeah. The first thing was the CMA.
CMA. The other is a marketing plan. And then the third is weekly updates on the progress. I've even written in, with the buyer's permission, that if I failed to provide a weekly update, that the buyer would lose their earnest money and the contract would be terminated. But that's with the buyer's permission. But again, you better provide it up every week or you're in trouble. Okay, so you just want to explain to them what that process looks like. You want to talk about a 48-hour kick-out clause. Genevieve learned what this was this week, I think, where you are, if the seller wants to give you a first right of refusal, it means that you as the buyer, if you have a home sale contingency and another buyer comes along and writes an offer, the seller would give you 48 hours notice. Typically it's 48, sometimes it's 72 or 24. It's a fill in the blank, so whatever the seller wants to put it as. Is going to give you 48 hours notice that they've received another offer, and give you 48 hours to remove your contingency on the contract, or they could sell the house to somebody else and terminate your agreement. So you just want to talk about the possibility of that with them so that there's no surprises, and you want to talk about whether or not they need this or can they qualify without the home sale contingency. I've worked with lots of buyers over the years that told me they had a home sale contingency, but most qualified without having to sell their house. So at least knowing that on the front end meant that when we did get the 48-hour first right of refusal, my buyers had options. They could remove the contingency because they still qualified. Some people can't. It just depends on your buyer. All right, the appraisal contingency, you want to talk to the buyer about that process, how the appraisal process works. You want them to understand that that's a process ordered by the lender, that you're not in control of it, and that all we need it to do is appraise for at or below the sales, or at or above the sales price, and what that looks like. You do want to talk about the type of inspections they're going to order. So this is where you're talking to them about whether or not they want to do a radon test, whether or not they want a survey, whether or not they want the pool inspected, whether or not they want the septic tank inspected. So you want to talk about the different types of inspections that exist, approximate costs for those inspections, and just let them know that they can decide at a later date per the property which inspections they're going to want to do, but that they should be prepared to pay for those inspections prior to closing. Okay. I have had very, very brilliant clients, physicians even, which people think are very smart, that literally thought that they could pay for their inspections at closing. So some people just don't know. And it's our job to make sure that they know, hey, whatever inspections you're ordering, you are expected to pay for prior to closing. D, we talked about who pays the title and the home warranty. And then E is how will we compete with other offers? So this is the part where I'm going to explain to them, especially if they're in a very competitive price range. So Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I need you to know you're looking for a house under $250,000 in Nashville. It is very likely that whatever house you fall in love with and that you want to write an offer for is very likely that we could have to write 5 or 6 offers before we get one accepted. What does telling a buyer on the front end that information, what does that do?
It lets them know what to expect.
Right? So if you don't tell them that on the front end, after you lose the first offer, they may be okay, they'll get over it, and then you convince them to go look at another house, and now you've written a second offer, and you lose a second offer. By the time you roll around to the third offer, if you have not explained that to them on the front end, you are likely going to get fired by your buyer, or your buyer is just going to say, forget it, because they don't know that this is expected or that this is something that's possible. They don't know that we could have to write multiple offers before we get one that works. They also don't know that they're competing. You guys got to remember, there are 5 hedge funds in Nashville buying properties, between 30 and 50 properties a month, each one of them. And they all are trying to buy a house under $300,000. So if your buyer is looking in the same criteria, your buyer is competing with 5 hedge funds who have bazillions of dollars worth of cash, which means you can write multiple offers for a buyer before yours gets accepted, because you're dealing with a THDA buyer or an FHA buyer or even a VA buyer. And all these people are trying to buy the same types of houses with cash. So it's important that they understand we're going to be competing with other people in this market, in your price range. And here's what I need you to know, that it is likely we could write more than one offer for one house. It is likely that we're going to be competing with other buyers that have cash. So what suggestions do you have for them? I'm going to suggest, if you find a house that you fall in love with, that we write a letter to the seller, that we do a video for the seller, that I even had a client that was a songwriter who wrote a damn song for the seller to attach. So you got to be creative sometimes, and you guys laugh, but I'm telling you, like, hey, you've got to be creative in how, if you've got 12 stacks of paper, you've got 12 offers in front of you. For a lot of sellers, it's all about the money. Which one is going to make me the most money? But for some sellers, it's not. That's where they've raised their children. That is where they have planted memories. They, it's emotional to them too. And they sometimes don't care about the bottom dollar. They want to sell their house to a family or to someone that's going to take care of their house the way that they did. And so it makes a difference sometimes. So just be prepared. Talk to your clients about whether or not that's something that they want to do. Or, especially if they're looking under 200,000, have them start drafting the letter now, or you could write the letter for them and have them sign it. I've had engineering clients that couldn't write a sentence. So asking them to write a letter to a seller was like pulling teeth. So I just would write the letter for them and have them sign it, because I'm very good with words, and I could write it and make it very poetic and endearing and emotional, and they couldn't even write 5 sentences. So do what you got to do sometimes to help your people be competitive, right? And then the last part I want to talk about is our process. So I want them to know that I utilize checklists in my business, my contract to close. So when we find a house, we get it under contract, I'm going to use checklists so that nothing slips through the cracks. I'm also going to make sure that I am managing all the timelines on the contract so that you are in compliance with what your obligations on the contract are. I'm sending that contract to the title company. My preferred title company is XYZ. You are free as a buyer to select whatever company you would like, but I work with these people every day, and I know they're going to do a great job for you. You're also going to order your inspections. I'm going to order those for you, but you are welcome to order whatever inspections you want from whatever company you would like, but I'm going to take care of that for you. And we'll talk about whether or not you want to be present that day or what time is going to be best for you. And then the same thing with the final walkthrough. The title company is going to do all their work behind the scenes to make sure that there are no claims to the title, that they're going to communicate with the mortgage company. And then prior to closing, you and I are going to do a final walkthrough of the property to make sure that everything that we asked to be repaired has been fixed, and that the house is in better or same condition as it was when we wrote our contract. And then we're going to go to the closing table, and you're going to sign the documents that the mortgage company and the title company require in order for us to transfer the ownership from the previous owner to you. So you're just explaining the process in a nutshell. One thing I forgot to talk about up at the home search process, when I was talking about timing, I forgot to mention too that you need to find out your client's availability. So talk to me about your work schedule. What days are you going to be available to look at properties? Are you off on Saturdays? Are you only available on the weekends? Is Thursday after 4 the only time you can look at houses? I forgot to mention that. but it's really important that you find out what their schedule is like, especially if they're looking in a price range that's a lot lower, that's very competitive. Because if you have a buyer who's only available on Thursdays after 4, that's going to impact their success rate of being able to answer and go look at a property quickly when it comes on the market. And you need to know that. The same thing with how the other way that comes into play is that, you know, if somebody is local and they, you know, they're here locally and a house comes on the market that fits their criteria, they're going to almost want to go look at a house almost every day, which is going to run you ragged, make you tired. You're going to lose motivation. They're going to lose motivation. So you want to talk about with them and say, hey, because you're local, what I would love to do is, if it's not in a super competitive where you have to jump right away, what I'd like to do is for us to set aside a Saturday and go look at 7 or 8 houses on Saturday. Or let's gather 2 or 3 together and go look in an afternoon. Because if you take this person out one property at a time, they're not going to find it fun. You're not going to find it fun. You're going to invest a lot of time and energy in somebody one house at a time, where their excitement is going to start to wane. So just my advice to you is, especially if somebody's local, try to get them to go look at 7 or 8 houses one day, or 3 or 4 houses in an afternoon, versus let's go look at one property every single day, because you're going to get tired, they're going to get tired, and they're not going to think it's very fun. Okay? Questions about any of that?
Laura, I'm sorry, I had to step away, take a phone call for a little bit of this, so I missed some of it. But did you go over one thing I've started doing? I didn't do this before, but when my buyers get under contract with a home, I've started having the title company tell them or give them a kind of an understanding of what their closing costs, if they're paying their own, kind of what those numbers are going to look like. Because sometimes that I've actually had people gasp at that. And so I think I didn't think I was doing my job if I didn't totally prepare them for the numbers that they were looking at before they ended up getting their Alta, you know?
Yeah. Well, you can talk about that when you're talking about the process, about what they need to know and what to expect. So under section 5, where it's talking about the process, I would make sure, so there's another sheet that's also in the Dropbox that talks about out-of-pocket expenses in Dropbox under buyers. And if you don't have access to it, let me know and I can email it to anybody who wants it. But there is an out-of-pocket expenses estimate, and I always put those in my buyer packets for first-time home buyers, so that they know, hey, these are the things you're going to pay for on the front end before you even get to closing. And then as part of my process, I'm also explaining to them that the lender is going to provide them with an estimate of what their closing costs are, and if they need something more specific than the one the lender provides, then my title company can do a settlement, like a sample settlement statement for them based on the numbers, so that they're prepared. But you know, I have always left, and I guess again, it matters who you work with, what lenders you're working with, but my lenders have always done an amazing, incredible job on the front end of making sure that the buyers know exactly how much money they need for their closing costs, and they're usually pretty spot on estimating that. So if someone's gasping, it means that the lender did not do a good job of that on the front end, or that the buyer never got that, period.
Well, I will tell you, I've had it happen when the buyer brings their own lender.
Yes, always.
To the table.
Yeah.
Not with the couple of lenders that I prefer to work with.
Sure. Which is why I said that's the other part that you want to talk about with the buyer, is about your team. So down there in the process, your team, I've always had buyers who came to me with their own buyer or with their own lender, right? And said, oh, well, we've been using this guy. He's done our loans for the last 5 houses we bought, blah, 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 right? And what I have always had to say is I respect your decision to choose whoever you'd like. I understand that you have a relationship with them. I will tell you, in my experience, a lender from out of state grossly underestimates the costs that are involved with your loan. And I don't want you to be surprised, and I don't want you to be unprepared. So I would love for you, if you're going to continue to use this lender, please have them check with local people to make sure that their estimations are correct.
Yeah.
Or have them send it to me so that I can review it, so I can help make sure that your fees are accurately estimated. Because that's been the biggest concern, is that out-of-state lenders typically do not estimate properly what the cost should be.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but this is where you get to guide the transaction. And again, there are going to be times where they're just going to be hell-bent and set on, I'm going to use my own lender, and that's okay. But
Yeah.
I need you to know, here's what I'm going to run into. The listing agent may have a problem with a non-local lender. They may advise their client not to take the offer because they don't know your lender, and that could create problems. We could have communication issues with your lender. Your lender may not be able to do it on time, all of which affect and impact your contractual obligation. So, you know, we've got to make sure that they know that. Make sense?
Yep.
All right. So the last thing is just in Paperless Pipeline, under the reference tab, there is a package called Buyer Consultation Package. And in that package, there is a buyer representation agreement. So you'll have all 6 pages of the buyer rep. You will have your electronic signature disclosure. You have your broker-based fee form. You have your wire fraud warning. And then you have your disclaimer notice. These are all documents that you can have signed ahead of time before you go find a house, right? Does everybody agree with me that you could get these all signed before you ever find your first house?
Yes.
Yes. In a perfect world where you did a consultation appointment and you presented these documents to them and said, okay, we're ready to hire you as our agent. These are some forms that we're going to need to sign regardless of which house we choose, and you get those signed and filled out, right? These are the documents that are most often missed when agents turn in a contract to me in the pipeline. They turn in the contract, and then all the buyer docs are missing. So these are things that if you are doing this consultation as a 2-step process, I'm going to do a consultation and then we're going to go write an offer, then you would have had these all filled out on the front end so that you're not missing them from your package. Whether you get them from Paperless Pipeline or Transaction Desk, I don't care. I just want you to know that I've already put these together in a package for you in Paperless Pipeline. And these are all the docs that you would get signed at a consultation prior to choosing or selecting a property. Okay. The last thing I want to share with you guys is, let me go to, I think it's this tab. Nope, it's this tab. Hang on. All right. Now you just have to hold on for it to actually open. One day. So in Dropbox, under buyers, and again, we're shifting everything from Dropbox to, if you guys heard me, we're moving everything over to an intranet. So if you're not able to get into Dropbox, or if you haven't ever been able to access Dropbox, do not worry. Everything that's in Dropbox is moving over to a company-wide intranet that you guys will all have access to, and nobody will have problems opening or accessing any of the collateral materials and things that we have for you, okay? Why? Let me see if I can get this to work again. Can you guys see the presentation or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Well, of course, then it goes away, right?
Yeah.
In Dropbox, there is under the buyers folder, Jude uploaded his buyer consultation presentation that's in there, so that you guys can edit it and make it your own.
Oh, beautiful.
It's very robust. It's 18 slides. It's full of all kinds of information. You guys are free to, and he's given permission to share that with you guys so you can edit it and make it your own. There's actually in there, there's also notes that go along with the presentation, slide by slide, that are kind of talking points to tell you what you would say at each presentation. So I will just tell you now, you guys know I love presentations. So I'm always a big fan of being professional and making sure that, your buyer has information that, is easy to digest and easy to read. But sometimes I think presentations can be a little overkill, and I think sometimes you just have to be yourself. And I think sometimes you just need to cover the things that are on your outline, but you don't have to have a full-fledged presentation. I wanted to present the presentation to you so that you can decide for yourself. I think it's better to have one, and then you decide whether or not you want to use it in your business. But I do think it's helpful to have a really robust presentation that covers your services as an agent and what you do. Because remember, that presentation can always be emailed, it can always be sent, it can always be mailed, it can always be dropped off. Whether you cover all the points that are on it in a actual presentation or talking is up to you. But I want you guys to know that that is available in the Dropbox. You can edit it and make it your own. It's just up to you about how you want to utilize that. Okay.
Laura, there's
Yes, ma'am.
also the, and it's a little different. It's kind of the same, but it's a little different. The buyer's tour.
Yes.
Yeah, in the cloud, and you can actually, there's the ability to personalize that quite a bit, actually. And I've used that when I have buyers coming into town and we're going to be looking at several properties. I use it for that, and I think it's good for that. I love Jude's presentation. Maybe if you're just gonna kind of look at one property here, one property there, you know what I mean? You're not.
Well, Jude's is more of a consultation, and remember the tour part is more of when you're actually looking at properties.
Yeah.
So that's the thing, is if you have it as a two-step process where you're doing just an overview of, let's talk about how we're going to work together and everything you need to know about this process. That's
Right.
where that type of presentation comes in. The other one is really good for somebody who's from out of town coming in, and you want to arm them with information on the properties you're looking at, in addition to personalizing it, where you put like a one sheet about you and your team or something like that in.
Yeah.
But
And you look really organized to those
Yes.
people too, because I love it. I've used it several times, and it's it wins people over. It really does. They're like, oh my gosh, look at this.
yeah,
Where is this? What are you talking about? What cloud? What happened?
it's okay.
If you go into the, well, Laura, you want to tell, it's in RealTracks.
In RealTracks, so let's say I selected 9 properties that we're going to go see, right? And when you go, and again, I'm not looking in RealTracks right now,
Okay,
so I'm
I
from
know what you're
memory.
saying.
Yeah,
Okay.
so when you go over to the More button, I think.
Yeah.
So instead of
It is.
Print More, when you go down there, you're actually selecting Property Tour, I think. And then that's actually going to take you to like Cloud CMA software that's going to put together a very impressive like tour book for you with those properties in it,
Exactly. Yeah,
statistical
okay, I know.
information, that kind of stuff. So it's just another way of presenting it rather than just printing off MLS sheets. It's putting it in a much more professional, impressive like material for you to give to your people.
Right,
And
okay.
what's really
I know.
nice too about it, Debbie, is that there are things that you can add or subtract from the information that you're giving your buyers. Is if they're first time home buyers, there's what to expect during the inspection, you can add and subtract from it. And it's very, if you will, elementary, but but it's good. It's just, it kind of shows you as the expert.
Cool. Okay.
Perfect. All right. Well, I really appreciate all of you guys' input today. I appreciate you guys sharing a little bit. I appreciate all your questions. I hope this helped, at least for you to understand the importance of a consultation. I will tell you right now that with the absence of a consultation, you're going to have problems with structuring your offers that are fair and competitive. You're going to have a lot of questions about what to expect about the process. You're going to have a lot of uneasy buyers that have buyer's remorse because they don't really understand the process. They don't know what expected anticipated costs are going to be. And you're also going to have buyers who just they're not secure and confident about what to expect. And so I think it does a lot, like we talked about, it does a lot of damage control on the front end by arming them with information. And it also gives you the opportunity to show them and talk to them about what it's going to be like to work with you. You know, here's what you can expect to work with me. I'm going to be responsive. You can text me. You can email me. You can send me a carrier pigeon when you find a house that you like. Like, you know, you're going to get to talk to them about everything you need to know. Okay. So, or what they need to know about working with you. So it gives you the opportunity to shine. It gives you the opportunity to be the expert. And it gives you the opportunity to establish that rapport and trust with them by making sure they're familiar with all this information on the front end before you guys ever go look at houses. Okay? Questions about anything that I can help with?
I don't think so. I always learn something new. I've sat through a few of these and I feel like I always come away with another little nugget. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here. All right, you guys go out and sell something. If you need me, I'm here, okay?
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Have a wonderful day, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.